Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there's a broad consensus amongst the people of this country that when we spend dollars through the federal treasury, when we spend taxpayer dollars, that they should be used to fund American jobs. In fact, that's been a law on the books since the early part of this century. The Buy America Act for a long time has required that when we buy things, whether it be through the military or through the Department of Transportation, that we buy things from American contractors. Makes more sense today than ever before, because as we struggle to try to get our economy back up and running, one of the sectors that is hurting more than others is the construction sector. And so every time that we violate the Buy America provisions of our law, we lose the opportunity to try to alleviate great stress that is currently upon our construction industry. Thankfully, the DOT has been one of the best agencies, actually, when it comes to making sure that American-made material goes into construction projects. The $41 billion that the Highway Administration receives in this bill to be spent on roads and bridges, it's an important engine of job growth throughout the country. And I have to say, they generally do a pretty good job, as opposed to some other agencies, the Department of Defense at the top of the list, in making sure that those dollars go to American companies. But there are circumstances in which the Buy American provisions are waived. There are a number of ways that you can waive those provisions, but it's important for us to have full transparency and disclosure when the Department of Transportation and when FHWA is considering awarding a major project funded by American taxpayers to a foreign company. You see, when the Buy America statute is waived, the requirement that American-made material be used is null and void. And so what this bill says is that when the FHWA provides public notice that they are considering waiving the Buy America clause for a particular project, that they include in that public notice a consideration of the impact on American jobs. It's worth knowing whether a waiver is simply going to result in the loss of 10 American jobs or the loss of 500 American jobs. And this amendment very simply says that when a waiver to the Buy America law is pending, that we should know from the Department of Transportation and from FHWA how many American jobs are at risk. That gives us the opportunity to weigh in and try to make sure that that waiver is not granted. That, frankly, gives American companies a little bit better information with which to use when they are trying to make the case that they can actually do the work that may be being considered for a foreign company. We all know what's happening to jobs in the building trades. Some parts of the country, unemployment is hitting 20% when it comes to carpenters and operating engineers and plumbers and sheet metal workers. I want to applaud the DOT on being, I think, one of the models when it comes to trying to make sure the taxpayer dollars are kept here at home. But this amendment would just make sure that in those limited cases where the DOT is sending work overseas, that we get a chance to understand what the real impact is going to be. I will say this before yielding the floor, Mr. President. We have a lot of work to do when it comes to tightening our Buy America laws. We're here talking about the DOT, but the real problem is in another agency that we will hopefully have a chance to talk about later on the Senate floor, and that's the Department of Defense. About 70% of federal purchasing comes through the Department of Defense, and I will tell you that they have been expediting the offshoring of defense work at a rate that should make every single senator on this floor shudder. And so this is an important amendment that I hope will get bipartisan support. I thank Senator Collins for allowing it to become pending on the floor, and I think is just the beginning of a lot of work that we have to do when it comes to enforcing a very simple principle, that when our constituents send their hard-earned tax dollars to Washington, D.C., and they get used to buy things or to build things for the United States government, that we hire U.S. companies, American workers, to do the job. I yield the floor, Mr. President. I'm sorry, Mr. President. Let me first ask for unanimous consent that there be a period for debate only until 2:15 today.
Without objection.
With that, I yield the floor.